everyone to the Body Pod. We are here with Dr. Tony Boutagy again, and today we are talking about all things cardio. So welcome, Tony.
Great to be here.
We are going to discuss, I want you to kind of discuss cardio, but really breaking it down into the different types of cardio. And as females, what do we need as we're aging? Because I know they're very different. How can we get into that? So I'm just going to let you start with cardio in general and talking about the different types of cardio that we can do.
Sure thing. There's essentially three different zones that we can exercise in. And you could simply put this as we've got walking, which is zone 1. And then we've got jogging, which is zone 2. And then we've got running hard and sprinting, which is zone 3. And within those three zones, the body is operating quite profoundly differently in terms of the cardiovascular input, muscle metabolism, and muscle fiber recruitment. These three zones, walking, jogging, running, to the body are very different phenomena, causing different adaptations. This is where the debate is, well, what's the best? And the answer to that is, well, what do you want to achieve? Do you just want cardiovascular health? Do you just want energy expenditure? Do you just want to feel good? What do you want to achieve? And from a coach's perspective, you would try and put a little bit of time in each of those three zones, because as we've just said, they're actually doing three different things. As a rule, the more you move towards zone 3, the more recuperation you need. And studies have repeatedly shown that when you are performing exercise in zone 3, or the high intensity, severe intensity domains where you really are puffing, unable to talk, and you don't want to do this for long periods of time, that's where we do interval training. That zone has the most profound ability to affect cardiovascular parameters such as cardiac output, VO2 max, and the ability of the body to pump blood around the body and take in oxygen. But there's a penalty, and that penalty is recuperation. Zone 2 doesn't have the same profound ability to affect those cardiac outputs, chamber size, heart pumping, how much blood you're putting out there, VO2 max. But it works very well on muscle metabolism. It helps you burn carbohydrate and fat extremely well. And then zone 1 really does help you get rid of glucose from the blood a lot. It doesn't require recuperation. You could walk, all things being equal, all day, every day. And a coach will try and do a lot of zone 1 and 2 because you can do it consistently every day. And we sprinkle in a little bit of that zone 3 with the interval training to get that top end cardiovascular. One final point is that it doesn't seem to take a lot of work to rev the heart up. So you don't need to do hours of interval training. You might need to do 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes a week, but you do need hours of time in zone 1 and 2. Lots of walking, lots of jogging, and it could be any mode, of course. But you need lots of that work and just a little bit of the intervals.
Okay, so I think this is where it gets confusing, because I had a coach that I swear had like 10 zones.
Yeah, right.
I like how you broke it down into 3 for sure.
Yeah.
There was one time I was swimming and he was like, start the lap at zone 2 and then end in zone like 2.5. And I was like, bro, I've got one zone. It's slow or flailing. Like that, those are the 2 zones that I have. I don't have any in between. So really just breaking it down to steady state or an interval that's really hard.
Mm-hmm. It's because those 3 zones are well accepted to have 3 discretely different physiological phenomena happening inside the body. Walking to jogging to sprinting is doing something entirely different to metabolism, to lactate, to heart rate, to ventilation, to core temperature. Totally different, but they're very discrete in those zones. And if you were to plot, say, lactate as a function of metabolism, when you're walking, lactate doesn't move. And when you go into a jog, then lactate will get to about 2 millimolars and then it will just plateau. Nothing happens. In other words, the body can get rid of it at the same time that the body is producing it. But then when you go from a jog into a run, lactate keeps going up and up and up until task failure and you stop. These 3 zones are very different with what they're doing inside the body from a heart, metabolism, and muscle fiber recruitment. Now, coaches look at those 3 zones and say, right, yes, metabolism and heart are doing 3 different things, but within each zone, you could probably work at the lower end and the upper end and we're going to give you more zones. And a 5-zone model is really common. And in cycling, you can go 7. And yeah, we've seen higher than that. And that's where it gets, well, I'm not going to say silly, because each coach has a reason for prescribing things. But let's just make it easy. You've got walking, jogging, and interval training. How much do you need to do in each of those? Well, you need to do a lot in walking and jogging, because it takes so long to improve metabolism and get the muscles used to burning fuel and not creating a lot of waste products. Interval training, on the other hand, is profound at improving cardiovascular fitness, but you don't need much of it at all. In fact, the data shows that less is probably even better, because you can work harder. Intensity really is the key. So when you do interval training, it is meant to be a lot of pain, but for a short period of time.
Okay, so I think that's where women probably get it wrong, because I had a client that I gave interval training to for the first time outside of just the weights room. And she came and she was like, well, that was super easy, Haley. I mean, I did it all. It's way too easy for me. And I'm like, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And essentially, interval training, there are 3 ways we can go about doing it. Firstly, it all means that it has to be hard for true interval training to get the cardiovascular benefits. In other words, we need to stress the heart. And we can do that with long intervals, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes. We can do so with sprinting. And by definition, sprinting is all out. So you're not trying to pace yourself. You just as hard as you can. But who can sprint more than 30 seconds? So sprinting is typically 15, 20, 30 seconds tops, but there's no pacing. It is as hard as you can go, like sprinting up a hill, sprinting on a bike, on a assault bike. And then you slow down, you get to 30 seconds. I can't keep doing this. The brain says go, but there's nothing anymore. That's sprinting. And then we've got what are called short intervals. And most people are familiar with these, like the Tabata, 20 seconds of work, really short rest, 10 seconds. And you'll do those for blocks of time, maybe 4 minutes, 15 on, 15 off. And you're not sprinting because you're doing it for 4 minutes. These are 3 ways of organizing work to rest to bring about your ability to get your heart up and keep it up. So they're doing slightly different things, but ultimately it's all in that zone 3. It's all hard. Lactate goes through the roof. The heart reaches maximum. It feels unpleasant, but you're only doing it for 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, so a sprint requires an all-out effort, requires much more recovery time than, say, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, correct?
Correct. And most studies would typically use 4 to 6 sprints only. And when you go above that, you start to pace. You know, oh, I've got 10 of these to do. You're going to hold back. Interval training for sprinting works because you go as hard as you can go.
Yeah. Okay, so how does the low intensity steady state, how does that help us in the weights room?
Great question. This predominantly has to do with how the body is clearing byproducts, and we'll use the word lactate. When you produce lactate primarily in your fast twitch fibers, in the old days, it was thought that lactate would just increase and it stops your body's ability to produce force. So we want to try and keep lactate levels low. Research over the last 2 decades has shown that lactate is indeed produced in fast twitch fibers, but is shuttled straight across to slow twitch fibers where it can be used as a fuel. Now, that means 2 things. You need to have the machinery to shuttle from fast twitch to slow twitch, and you need the machinery in the slow twitch to use it as a fuel. And that requires mitochondria and mitochondrial and lactate enzymes. You develop this maximally when you are performing that low intensity steady state or the zone 2 exercise. It builds the enzymes and the transporters in the slow twitch fibers to help receive the lactate and use it as a fuel. When you lift weights, let's say you want to build your quadriceps, your front thighs, and you do zone 2 training, you're on a bike and you're keeping lactate levels low, your heart rate at, let's say, 75% of maximum, and you can do an hour of this regularly. You have now built incredible capacity in your slow twitch fibers to accept lactate and use it. So when you go into the weights room and you do some leg press and some lunges and some squats and lactate goes through the roof, what will happen is that your body is so good at getting that lactate and shuttling it across and getting it back down So you can keep doing other sets. In other words, the volume load or the amount of load that you lift across the sets and across the workout has been maintained. And if you don't have that machinery in muscle, it means that you build up lactate and then your load drops and you cannot lift the same weight for the same reps across the same exercises. And that reduces your ability to do volume and work. That reduces your outcomes.
So what would you recommend doing zone 2 a week? Like how many times a week doing
As a
zone
coach, I would ask the client, how much are they doing it at the moment? And then we build progressively, slowly and progressively, up to several hours a week. It takes a really long time. Now, most people don't have several hours a week. I would try and push for a minimum of around 3 hours a week, spread across multiple sessions. And that could be 4 lots of 45-minute sessions, 3 lots of 1 hour, something like that. But it's probably reaching a peak at 5 hours a week. And my position, knowing that interval training is so effective, but you don't need to do a lot of it, I would typically allot 3 cardio sessions a week. And 45 minutes would be in zone 2. And then 10 minutes at the end, maybe even 5, would be spent really revving the system and then a cool down. So that's an hour done. Now, that way I can discreetly improve zone 2 mitochondrial enzymes to help you receive lactate. And then I rev the system at the end to get the cardiovascular system. We do that 3 times a week. I really think for most people, that is the winning formula.
Okay, so I love how you say that they do completely different things. So the list helps it's kind of your engine builder.
Mm-hmm.
You can do more in the gym. And then, I mean, I like the difference there, because I think there's 2 camps. There's the coaches that if you're lifting weights, they're telling females not to do cardio at all because it's going to interfere with their muscle building gains. Or you have the flip side where women are just kind of doing whatever they want in the gym because they know that's important, but then they're just like cardio queens all the time outside of like an endurance event. That's a different conversation, but where they're just feel like they have to like sweat in order to feel like they're getting a workout.
Well, that's right. And there's lots in that sentence to unpack, because weight training and cardio training have been thought for a long time to be antithetical, that they interfere with each other. Mm-hmm. And that's actually not the case. But for those people who do a lot of cardio, but then don't replace the energy, they're lifting weights in low energy. And that's an enemy of anything you want for muscle mass. You want energy balance to slight energy surplus. But if you go into an hour of cardio and you expend 600 calories and you only eat 200 because you're fearful of gaining weight, and then you go lift weights, you're in low energy and your muscles will not thank you for that. So we need to distinguish the difference. Is it the cardio or is it the low energy? They're 2 very different things. And studies that can control the energy but give you cardio and weights show there is no interference. Maybe with a bit of power, but not from strength and muscle mass. And I think that's important to get. The other is not weight training has to hurt. You have to work very close to failure, because placing tension on the muscle is a key driver of anything we're wanting to get from weight training. And that occurs when you lift close to failure. Cardio is not. You don't have to, every time you do cardio, you don't have to cough up a lung. You don't have to feel green. You don't have to have the vomit bucket. You can be working in these low intensity domains and producing the very adaptation that you want. And the most important aspect for cardio is consistency and regularity. And if you're training so hard that you could only do it once a week or twice a week, and you have this fear around it and you feel sick in your stomach before you do it, that's not going to be a 6-month practice or a lifelong practice. So I am a strong advocate of the lower intensities most of the time for most people.
Okay, great. Do you, just in closing here, do you recommend this or do you prescribe it for each of your clients?
I do. There's a big difference between the prescription of it and its application. There's no gene that encodes for people who take advice and will follow it through. And my job is to try and explain it, to understand this is why you're doing it and the benefits you're going to have from it, which are far-reaching. And then the other is, let me try and remove all the barriers so that you can fall in love with it and make it part of your daily practice. But humans are designed to move and move a lot. And we create these our own barriers. So it has to be this and it has to be sprinting. And we need to, if you can't walk, And if you can jog, then jog and walk, but it doesn't have to be as hard as possible. It has to be consistent and regular.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been another fascinating conversation, and our audience loves you. So thank you so much for coming back on, and we look forward to our next episode.
Likewise. Thanks so much, ladies. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the Body Pod with your friends.
Until next time.